Hi everyone, it's David from Automotive Press. I have a really fascinating video today because I'm going to be doing a comparison of a number of really important mid-size body-on-the-frame trucks, starting with a Ford Ranger Raptor, but I'm also going to be driving the regular Ranger as well, and I'm going to compare that side by side to the Jeep Gladiator, another important truck, this time from Jeep. So I'm going to talk about all three trucks, but also reference back to Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro, which I don't have it right beside me, but as you know, I've driven that truck a couple of times, so I can talk about it in relationship to all of these competitors. So it's a really fascinating video, and it's going to be a little bit long because it's a full comparison, but stay with me so you can figure out which of the truck might be right for you. Let's go. Welcome back. So once again, what I'm going to do is talk about the Ford Ranger Raptor, which is new for 2024. Compare that to the Jeep Gladiator in a Rubicon format, so the direct competitor. And then also compare to the regular Ford Ranger, which I'll be driving as well, and reference all of them back against the Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro, as well as maybe talk a little bit about the Tacoma Trailhunter as well. So lots of things to talk about. Right off the bat, let's use my review template and do a comparison of the exterior, the interior, performance, environment, and also value. So I'm going to start off with the quality right now. A quick check on this Ford Ranger, which by the way is built in 4 different plants around the world. So it is a global product. This one is built in Wayne, Michigan. That's for Canadian and US market. But they also built the Ford Ranger in Argentina, in South Africa, even in Thailand. So it's a very important model for Ford because it serves the global market. Back to the quality of the exterior first. I'm a little bit disappointed though because this is over 5 millimeters in the front, and it gets really narrow right down to 3 millimeters. So I want to see that 3 millimeter carried all the way to the forward. That would have been perfect, but I would say a bit of a compromise here, but good quality on this side. But the doors are a little bit better because this is 3.5 millimeter. This one is 4 millimeter. And this one is 4 millimeters. So I would say it's about the average. The paint quality is not bad though. Like it's pretty glossy paint, not too much orange peel, a little bit around here, but the glossy paint, especially in this beautiful dark green color, is actually quite nice. But I'm going to have to give it about the 3.5 for overall quality out of 5 because of the problem with the gap, and it's also a little bit misaligned, but the paint job looks good. What about in terms of just the engineering or design of the exterior? Well, it kind of depends on your subjective judgment, but I think Ford does a really good job with the exterior design. Bold, refreshing, but with a very much of a Ford signature design up here. And then we got headlight that stack up vertically, and a big, huge fender flare sticking out with a little bit of accents over here. Big all-terrain BF Goodrich KO3 tires, which are new gen tires. I really like this one right here, which is sticking out quite a bit, so that if you actually open the door from another car beside it, it will hit this first before the door, and therefore you shouldn't get door dings. So I really like when they have a really big running board that's also really strong. Otherwise, design is quite conservative, and it's what you expect from Ford. Ford does a really good job of the trucks, as you know. Ford F-150 still best-selling truck in the world, so you know what, they don't mess with good design. They stay true to the recipe that made Ford trucks very popular. I really like the rear part of the truck as well because this one has a spray-in bed liner, and I like the fact that this is also pretty tall. Some trucks have this height a bit too low, so you can't put a really big cooler if you have a tonneau cover, and this is also really light because it's aluminum and wall balance. So overall, I think in terms of engineering and design, it's straightforward, nothing complicated in here. And like I said, I like the big running board, and the design looks great, and Ford buyers will love this design because it follows very closely Ford design philosophy. So what do I really think of the exterior engineering? Well, I'm going to give an overall quality of 3.5 out of 5.0. All right, so now I'm inside the Ford Ranger Raptor. Again, this is the Raptor version of the Ranger, not your ordinary Raptor trucks. I will take a look at the regular Ranger interior as well in a second, but first let's take a look at this particular model. I love the kind of orange-red accent, which by the way kind of matches my gauge here along the ventilation opening, as well as on the steering, a little bit red mark over here. So the accent and design-wise is actually quite simple, but very effective because again, looks like a Ford, with a vertical large infotainment system, which, by the way, I actually think that their infotainment system is easier to use than the one I see in Toyota models. However, you don't get buttons for everything, so that's sort of a bit of a penalty. You do have some of the controls here, including both HVAC and some of the volume control here, but otherwise, to do anything with more details, you're gonna go into here. And this part is fixed, so it is electric, but you can actually see it all the time. You have a pretty good, well-designed layout for the instrument cluster as well. I did notice though that we don't have a strap over here on this side, but I do have it on the passenger side. That's a bit of a mess because that's one of the biggest complaints I have about trucks. I don't have it here and I don't have it here, so that's a bit of a problem. But otherwise, I have a paddle shifter, and I even get four-wheel drive in automatic mode or all-wheel drive, which is not offered in the Tacoma TRD Pro or Trail Hunter for that matter. So that's one advantage for the Ranger. Otherwise, the grips and everything is nice. One biggest complaint I have is the shifter, which looks like ordinary shifter, but I have to press here to shift out. But there's also a button on this side, which is for manual shifting, but you can't help but press the side button when you try to shift while pressing the top button. And this whole thing looks simple, but it's a bit tricky because to get it right into reverse, you put your hands there, and I can't see this because it's covered up. So this design isn't good. Not sure why they couldn't come up with a very simple one like what I see in Ford F-150. That would have been good. So in terms of quality though, I think everything looks good. Like when I do a bit of a punch test here, things are pretty solid and actually really nice soft materials as opposed to hard materials that you see in many trucks these days. And then the quality of plastics are good, but the stitching looks a little bit out of alignment here. But everything else looks good. So I give 3.8 for interior quality. But in terms of the engineering and design of the interior, I'm gonna give it 3.6 just because I'm deducting a little bit for not having the handle here and the awkward shifter. Everything else looks pretty good. What about the actual performance? Well, let's start with the powertrain, which is a 3-liter twin-turbo V6 engine called the EcoBoost, and it has 405 horsepower, 430 pound-foot of torque, so amazing amount of power and torque. You step on it, it's very easy to modulate the accelerator and takes off with a really good feel. So I would say the actual design and engineering and calibration of the engine is excellent. Maybe even better than the Tacoma TRD Pro, which has a 2.4-liter turbo with a hybrid, and I feel like the V6 is definitely a better feel for the truck. And of course, Jeep Gladiator also has a V6 engine as well, but I would say this one is probably the best iteration of the 3-liter V6 engine, and it is very powerful, smooth, and actually really fast when you step on the gas. And I do definitely like it compared to the 2.4 turbo hybrid in the Tacoma TRD Pro. I love this powertrain so much that I'm going to give a 4.5 out of 5.0. I think this is the best thing about the Ford Ranger Raptor. Okay, so now I'm on the road with the Ford Ranger Raptor, and as I mentioned, the 405 horsepower, 430 pound-foot of torque on this engine, plenty of pick up and go. I just step on it and takes off. But more importantly, how is the handling? Well, first of all, the steering has a really good feedback. It's actually quite hefty. It has a really good weight and a reasonable feedback despite having a very heavy-duty tires, which is BF Goodrich all-terrain KO3 tires, and that's a 10-ply tire, so it's a bit of a heavy-duty tire, but I still can feel the road quite good with my steering, and handling is still pretty reasonable. It's a truck, obviously, body on the frame, and so you're not going to get a sharp handling feel on this vehicle, but I like the general feel of the steering, and the handling is very reasonable for a mid-sized truck that's body on the frame. And it's definitely better than the Jeep Gladiator, which I'll talk about in a second, but about the same as Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro. But I do like the steering better on this vehicle because it is a bit heavier and provides more feedback. So that's sort of a handling side. I would give a 3.6 for handling because it's obviously a truck and there's only so much they can do on a body on frame truck to improve handling. But among all of the competitors, I would say the Ranger Raptor has perhaps one of the best feel for steering and one of the better handling as well. Next category is called environment, which covers comfort and usability. Well, the comfort is actually really good in the front seat, good side bolsters, but the seats are nicely cushioned, which is often the case with the Ford, and lots of spacing here as well. I talked about the grab handle earlier. But what about the rear seat? Well, much like other midsize trucks, it's a little bit tight, and no grab handle here as well. I do have one over here, so that's okay. But it is still tight. We talk about Tacoma that has a tight rear seat, but this is actually not much better. Although in the Tacoma TRD Pro, you have the special seat mechanism that takes up a lot of space. Whereas in Ford, we don't have that, so we have a little bit more space here, but still pretty tight. Headroom is okay though, and the seats are again quite comfortable, so I really like that. So in terms of comfort, based on my feedback and the passenger feedback, it's actually really good. I'll give a solid 4.0. And in terms of usability or practicality, how is that? Well, there's lots of storage space, including a very large front center console, and then right here I can actually open this up, which is often the case with many other trucks. And I can flip this and it'll stay locked over here, and decent space, not a huge amount, but pretty big space over here, bigger than what you see in Tacoma. A little bit space over here as well, and then I can fold this back again, and I still have a center armrest as well. So I think the usability is pretty good, including the pickup bed I'll show you in a second. So I'll give a 3.9 just because we have a bit of a tight space over here, but let me show you the pickup bed as well. So we're now at the back of the Ranger Raptor here, and like I said before, this is nice and light, soft open and soft close as well. It's got the bed liner on this one, which I really like, because some bed liners are really rough and they're kind of hard on the finger when you rub them, but here it's nice and smooth. So if you have to grab something and kind of drag it, it doesn't hurt your hands. And as I mentioned also earlier, this is pretty deep compared to many other midsize trucks. The GM Chevrolet trucks also has a pretty good depth as well. But on some other competitors' vehicles, this is sometimes too low. And if you have a tonneau cover, some of the larger coolers won't fit in. That isn't the case with the Ford. And of course, you can pick different pickup bed lengths based on which models you buy. This is a short pickup bed, but it has plenty of space. And therefore, I like the rear bed. And you also get a 115-volt outlet here as well. So overall, pretty good usability here. So following the Ford Ranger Raptor, I now have the Jeep Gladiator in the Rubicon format, fully loaded. And I also have the kind of a regular Ranger. This is the Lariat version, so not the Raptor. Both at the same time. Last week I had the Ranger Raptor. So lots of trucks this week. And so I'm going to focus now on the Jeep Gladiator and let you know what I think of this vehicle in terms of those engineers' attributes, starting with the quality. So this one is built in Toledo, Ohio plant, where both the Gladiator and the regular Wranglers are built. And they've been building these vehicles for some time now. But you know, the interesting thing is that it's a little hard to measure the gaps because these hoods are not designed to be like a regular hood. It kind of comes over. But if I were to try to measure it, it's 4 millimeter there, 4 millimeter here, but surprisingly, really tight around here, 3.5, 3.1 millimeter, and then down to 3.4 millimeter. So actually the gaps are quite good. And I was pleasantly surprised that the alignment is excellent, considering these doors are removable. And you guys might also remember that the hood is removable. This can tilt forward. And of course the roof comes off as well. So everything is kind of like a Lego set. But the panel fit is really good for this kind of vehicle, which is an unusual design because of all the things that can be removed. And the paint job is remarkably good. Even though I'm sorry, I don't like this color. This is a bright kind of yellowish green. Maybe it works on the Rubicon because it looks cool, but definitely not for me. But the actual paint quality is excellent with a very little orange peel. This kind of paint anyways hides some of the defects, so it's hard to even tell whether the paint quality is perfect. So the quality is actually better than expected. So I'm going to give a 3.9 for the exterior quality out of 5.0. And what about the design? Well, this is like engineer's dream. If engineer wanted to play with a Lego sets and then try to create the car following that same kind of principle of plug and play, this is it. You remove the hood, you can remove the doors front and back, you can tilt the front windshield, you can remove all the roof panels. So this is an amazing feat of engineering, and of course Jeep has been doing this for a long time, but to have that in a truck format, in a pickup format, is unheard of. No one else has a pickup truck where you can remove all this because Ford Bronco doesn't have a truck version yet. And also I think it's just a clever engineering in terms of how they designed it so that actual hinges are outside and how easy it is to flip things open and close. So I'm going to give solid 4.3 out of 5 for engineering design for exterior because no one else is really doing it. after so many years, Jeep still has a unique position in terms of these kind of features. Okay, so now I'm inside the Jeep Gladiator, and you know what? The Jeep has been criticized for many years of not having a great interior quality, but you know what? I find this one to be well built. All the stitches line up here and there. Everything is a softer plastic. Well, actually here's hard plastic here, but even the door has a softer plastic. It's absolutely rattle-free while I'm driving, even though I know the previous owners of Wrangler sometimes complain about squeaks and rattle over here, but at least for this model, nothing. It's solid, quiet, and built like a tank from my perspective. You know, having said that, it is a little bit plasticky here, and I'm not quite convinced that everything is going to be as well built as a Toyota. So let's say I'm going to give 3.8 out of 5 for interior quality. But in terms of interior design and engineering, once again, this is an unusual truck, an unusual design. This comes off because the roof can be completely open and the door comes off. And because of that, the power window switches are located here, for example, not on the door, because you have to be able to remove the door and disconnect the power supply. So I think the engineering is really clever. I'm really glad to see that all the controls are still manual in terms of audio, in terms of HVAC, with the big buttons that you can actually still operate it with the gloves on in winter time. So I'm going to give 3.9 for engineering and design because of the unique personality and unique character of the Jeep, where you can remove many things, but also actually the layout is well designed and easy to figure out, and ergonomic is actually quite good. So next category is performance, which includes powertrain and also the handling. Well, you're not going to expect an amazing handling out of this one, but let me go through my logic. First, in terms of powertrain, the important thing to note is that this one still has a V6 engine, whereas many competitors have ditched the V6 and went to Turbo 4. So that's something I really like. It's a 3.6 liter V6 engine. It's proven, it's been around for a long time. And while it's not a remarkable engine in terms of performance, it is proven and reasonably reliable and actually performs well. It's got a really good low-end grunt. And I actually still prefer naturally aspirated V6 engine compared to a Turbo 4, even though Turbo 4 might have a better low-end torque, especially when you look at something like a Tacoma with a Turbo 4 combined with a hybrid system. That's obviously better. So in terms of engine, it's reasonable. It performs as expected in something like this, and it's just not a performance leader, but I like the way it feels because it's a V6 engine, not a turbo engine. So I'm going to give it 3.6 out of 5.0, mainly because both the Tacoma and the Ford Ranger has a better powertrain in terms of power and torque. Just that they're turbocharged engine, in some cases turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, so the feel of the engine might not be as good, but they tend to perform better. Now, when it comes to handling, which is the next category under performance, that's a tricky one because the handling is not good on this vehicle. It's very much a pickup truck feel, very much a body on the frame feel, and both the Tacoma and the Ford Ranger have better handling, more accurate steering, and better cornering. Of course, this is not quite an apple-to-apple comparison just because of this type of design and engineering where all these things can come off, and therefore maybe it's not fair to compare directly with a Ford Ranger and Tacoma, but I'm going to only give 3.0 out of 5.0 for handling. So I'm going to call it average. It's not bad for a pickup truck, but it is pretty loose. One thing I do like is that it has a pretty hefty feel with a good feedback from the road, so I don't have a problem with that. It's just that it doesn't corner very well. It doesn't give me much of a confidence in terms of how it handled around twisty corners and twisty turns. This is not designed to be your performance vehicle, so obviously in this category it doesn't do so well. Next category is called environment, which includes comfort and usability or practicality. And in terms of comfort, it is actually totally fine on the highway, but this particular model comes with a heavy-duty mud tires, which means that the treads are really big and blocky, and because of that they don't do a great job of creating a smooth, soft ride, because these kind of tires are actually quite bumpy and a little bit jittery over highway speed. So I would say comfort is kind of average at the best. Seats are actually not too bad, and the ergonomics is, as I mentioned earlier, is not bad as well. So I would say for comfort, I would give a 3.6 because it's also a bit noisy on the highway, and I don't think passengers, typically speaking, appreciate this kind of design. As a driver, if I can open the top and make it into a bit of a convertible, then I really like it, but not always comfortable environment. What about in terms of practicality and usability? Well, let's move the back seat here and you'll see what I mean. It's not a huge amount of space, but not as bad as you think. You might think that because it's a kind of open top convertible design, it's a pickup truck, the rear seat will be compromised, and it is a little bit compromised because this seat is a bit vertical, but the actual legroom is not bad at all, better than Tacoma TRD Pro. So not too bad for practicality. Let's look at the pickup bed area here. And you'll notice that I have a very light, soft, damp rear tailgate, and actually quite a usable rear pickup bed with a really good grippy bed liner. But as I mentioned earlier, the Ford Ranger has a deeper depth. So for example, if you were to look at this Lariat that I have here, this is not the Raptor, but you can tell right away how much depth I have here compared to here. I don't have a tape measure right now, so I can't tell you the exact difference, but I would think it's at least an inch taller on that one. So this is a bit of a compromise. That's one of the issues with the Gladiator, but some people say they prefer a shallower bed because they can go on the side and kind of reaching and grab things. So some people say they actually prefer this one not being too deep, and so that's something you have to think about. But overall, being a pickup bed and the fact that I can open the top and everything makes it very usable. So I will give a 3.9 for the usability or practicality numbers, and let me continue to talk about the Jeep. By the way, comparing this to the Tacoma TRD Pro or maybe Tacoma Trail Hunter, I do admit that Tacoma is a little bit more practical in some way, but you don't get the open top feel of a convertible. So this is kind of a unique position, and in some way, you almost cannot compare this directly to Ford Ranger, whether it's the Tremor or regular Lariat model or the TRD Pro or Trail Hunter versions of the Tacoma, just because this has a unique positioning and a unique configuration that other trucks don't have. But regardless of that, let's talk about the value and also the resale value. Well, the value of this depends on what you're looking for. This thing here, as equipped, fully loaded with everything, is $90,000 Canadian, which is a lot of money. But as you guys know, Tacoma TRD Pro and Trail Hunter is also mid $80,000. So not all that different in terms of price range, but this thing is expensive. Now you can get a more basic Gladiator or even a more basic Rubicon, and price will be quite a bit cheaper because this one has all these special equipment, including the huge mud tires and so forth. But still, I'm a little bit surprised by the price, so I'm gonna give 3.5 out of 5.0 for value. And I'm not deducting any more points because, again, this is a unique model in the marketplace and no one has a direct competitor to this one. But in terms of resale value, it's going to be a bit of a difficult one because Jeep in general has not been super good with the resale. Wrangler models has been quite good compared to other Jeep models, but as a whole brand, Jeep tend to struggle a little bit with resale value. Still, it's above average, so I'm going to give 3.5 in terms of the resale value. So the overall value of the Jeep is actually quite good, but maybe not quite as good as, say, Tacoma, which has tremendously good resale value, although we don't know if the new Tacoma, all new for 2024, has the same level of resale value as a previous one. But if the history is repeating itself, then Tacoma is obviously the resale value leader, with many of the models being priced almost the same price as the new model itself. We have to continue to wait and see if the Rubicon version of the Jeep Gladiator will hold its value, or with all the things that are happening in the world, whether the price would decline somewhat. So that's the Jeep. Overall, I love it just because it's very different. And you know, if the Ford came up with a Bronco pickup truck, then we have a direct competitor. And if at some point Toyota decides to redesign the Tacoma with open top design, then yes, Jeep has a competitor. But for now, it's unique. It's not like anything else out there. And because of that, it has a very important place in the market. Now, even though the main comparison I'm doing on this video is between the Jeep Gladiator Rubicon against the Ford Ranger Raptor, because they kind of compete in terms of price range, I do have the Ford Ranger Lariat this week as well, and doesn't have all the off-road capability of the Rubicon or the performance of a Tremor, but it is still a Ford Ranger. It is still a capable pickup truck, and it has kind of a pseudo off-road tires as well. So I want to talk about the Lariat as a bonus as well, just to give you a perspective on whether you should buy something like a Ranger Raptor or the Rubicon, or should you just consider something more normal or regular like the Lariat. Well, to be honest with you, after driving the Tacoma TRD Pro, the Tacoma Trail Hunter, the regular Tacoma, the Jeep Rubicon Gladiator, and the Ford Ranger Raptor, And then finally, the Ford Ranger Lariat. I'll tell you what, I actually prefer as an everyday car this regular Ranger, which in this particular version, it's a Lariat. Why? It's actually the most comfortable, it's most usable, and for most of us who need a daily driver as opposed to a true off-roader, this just makes more sense. It's cheaper, it's more fuel efficient. This one has a 2.3 liter EcoBoost, which is a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, and it still has plenty of power and torque. And in some way, I think it's just more suitable as a practical utility vehicle compared to something like a Raptor or the Rubicon. I don't think you need such a high-performing special off-roading vehicles. For most of you, you might take these vehicles off-roading from time to time, but something like this is more than capable. It still has a bit of a lift. It's got a decent tires on it. If you really want to take this thing to more of a serious off-roading, lift it a little bit, put a lift kit on it, maybe change the tires, make it a little bit bigger and wider. And you know what that will actually do? You might not get all of the off-road features and the performance of a Ranger Raptor or the Gladiator Rubicon, but this will serve most of you guys. So my recommendation is that before you spend $80,000, $90,000 on the high performance vehicles, look at more of the mid-range, mid-trim models like this one, because it might turn out that these ones serve you better. So for example, if I were to just kind of do a quick walk around of the outside and inside, it's identical to the Ranger Raptor in terms of the size, the basic practicality, basic usability. The quality is about the same as well, with a decent paint job and a decent alignment, although as I mentioned in the Ranger Raptor, the gap is a bit wide over here, but not too bad for the rest of the panels. And I really like the interior of this Lariat, which comes with kind of this creamy color, and it looks great. It looks very inviting. The quality of the inside is actually not bad as well. And so, as I mentioned, if you want to buy a pickup bed that can do some off-roading, but you're going to be driving it as a daily driver, get the regular Ranger or mid-level Ranger like this one. Or if you want to get a Gladiator, same thing. You don't need to buy a Rubicon. And if you want to buy a Tacoma, again, same story. You can buy a regular Tacoma or even a Limited, which has a really comfortable ride, and that one has an all-wheel drive option as well. These vehicles will serve you just as well as some of the high-performance models that cost so much more, but honestly, most of us don't need them. So now I've compared the Ford Ranger Raptor to the Jeep Gladiator and also to the regular Ford Ranger, which is the Lariat model. 3 trucks, and we talked about Tacoma TRD Pro as well. I'm kind of curious which of those trucks do you like the best, because competitors have all moved forward and moved up in terms of performance, in terms of features, in terms of overall quality, and also usability. Everybody's putting their best foot forward, and it's going to be harder and harder to pick the right model, because in the past it was easy to decide since Tacoma was always the #1 selling midsize truck and had the best quality, but these days the quality isn't quite as good in the Toyota models, and therefore that advantage is removed somewhat. But I still think the Tacoma has overall better quality compared to a Ford Ranger or the Jeep Gladiator. But long-term reliability, I think of all the models are somewhat similar now, again, because of some challenges that they had in Tacoma lineup. But in terms of the final score here for what I call a value, which includes the price as well as the resale value, what do I give to the Ranger Raptor? I think the price is reasonable for the Ranger as a whole. The price is a little bit cheaper than Tacoma, so I think the value is good. I give it a solid 4.0 because the Ranger provides a lot of feature for the money. But the Raptor is expensive. This is 80,000 Canadian, a bit cheaper than Tacoma TRD Pro, but not by much. Still is one of the better values around. But in terms of resale value, I think Tacoma still has the highest resale value. So I would say it's above average, but not the best in industry. So I would say the resale value is about 3.7 out of 5. But the overall value is good, and therefore I really do like the Ford Ranger Raptor. And if I were to buy a midsize truck right now, even though my heart might go to Tacoma TRD Pro, this might be a better value overall. I'm curious as to what you really think of all these trucks. Let me know in the comments below. And if you can give me a thumbs up, I would appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, would you kindly subscribe as well? Until next video, I'm signing off for now. Thank you so much.